Friends, this is Sai Akash, a practicing chartered accountant from Hubli. In today's video, we'll understand the GST impact on the real estate sector in detail. So let us start. Now, as you are aware, if I sell land, so sale of land is totally out of GST. So if I am selling any land, उसके ऊपर GST नहीं आता, land के ऊपर GST नहीं आता. अभी जो भी बात करेंगे, we'll talk only about sale of building. Now, what is the point of sale? When am I selling that building? If I'm selling a building before getting CC, that is completion certificate, or before getting the first occupation certificate, only in that case GST is payable. If I'm selling a property after getting completion certificate, it is totally out of scope of supply. Understood? So if I'm selling any property after getting CC or after getting the first occupation, then GST is not payable. Now let us continue the story. What happens if I sell a property before getting completion certificate? The GST law treats it as a supply of service. You are giving construction service. In that case, GST become payable. GST will become payable. And when is to be paid? GST is to be paid as and when you raise an invoice or as and when you receive payment from your customer. Very simple rule. जब भी आप इनवॉइस रेज करते हो या जब भी आप कस्टमर से पेमेंट कलेक्ट करते हो, at that point of time you are required to collect and pay GST to the government. Correct? Now, what is the value of supply? If I go technically, value of supply means government, see what is the major portion when I sell a building? It is land, correct? So government is giving you 1/3 deduction for land. So whenever, say if I sell a property say for 1.5 CR, 1/3 of that is treated as a cost of land. So I have to pay GST only on the two-third component. Correct? 1/3 I'll get a standard deduction. So if I'm selling a property say for 1.5 crores, then 1/3 of that, that is 50 lakhs, I need not pay any GST because it pertains to land and land is out of scope of GST. Now whatever is the two-third amount on which I have to pay GST, that is my taxable value. On that value I have to pay GST. Yes. Before going ahead, let us understand some basic terminologies. There is something called RREP, Residential Real Estate Project, and there is something called other than RREP. So what do you mean by RREP? Residential Real Estate Project का मतलब क्या है? It means the total commercial area in your property is up to 50%, 15%. So if it is up to 15%, the commercial component in your apartment, if it is up to 15%, it means less than 15% or 15%. In that case, it is classified as a residential real estate project. In any other case means if my commercial component is more than 15%, it is called other than RREP, other than residential project. Correct? In residential project, there is residential component also, there is commercial component also, but this commercial component maximum it can be 15%. In other than RRP, again there can be residential, it can be commercial, but commercial will be more than 15%. Now understanding this is very important because whatever treatment is given in the GST law, it is dependent on whether your project is a residential project or non-residential project. Yes. Now, even in residential project, wherever there is residential project, there is one more concept which we understand, that is called affordable residential project. What do you mean by affordable residential project? It means your sale price is up to 45 lakhs. Sale price is up to rupees 45 lakhs, and the area, if it is in a metro city, then it is only up to 60 square meters, and if it is in other than metro areas, then it is up to 90 square meters. If both of these conditions are satisfied, then it is called an affordable residential project. Yes, first we understood what is residential, RREP, other than RREP. And in both the cases, there can be commercial component, there can be residential component. And if that residential component satisfies these two conditions, the sale price is less than 45 lakhs, and the area, if it is in metro cities, it is up to 60 square meters, and if it is non-metro, then it is up to 90 square meters. In that case, it is called an affordable residential project. Correct? What makes the difference? The difference is what is the amount of tax rate that you need to pay. Yes, coming to residential real estate project. Residential real estate project means commercial aspect is only up to 15%. Correct? In that case, again, if it is affordable, in residential plus affordable, residential in that affordable. If you see here, it is residential, in that again residential, again in that also if it is affordable. If it is affordable, what is the GST rate? GST rate is only 1%. So technically it is, first you need to take 1/3 deduction for land, and the remaining 2/3 you need to apply the GST rate. Now practically what happens is, on the total consideration rate only you do it into 2/3. So effectively for a residential project wherein the residential property is an affordable residential property. In that case, what is the effective GST rate? The effective GST rate is only 1%. Correct? Now, under residential real estate project, if it is non-affordable means it is not meeting these two conditions, 45 lakhs and 60 or 90 square meters. In that case, what is the GST rate? The GST rate is effectively 5%. You need to pay a GST of 5%. Now, coming to the commercial property, under residential real estate project also I can have up to 15% commercial property. So what is the GST rate on that? Effectively the GST rate is 5%. The GST rate is 5%. So these are the GST rates. Now why this classification of residential and non-residential or RREP or non-RREP was required is, whenever it is a residential real estate project, you see the tax rates are very less. It is 1%, 5% or 5%, correct? In that case, whatever purchases that you make with respect to that particular property, the GST that you pay, you cannot claim input tax credit. जो भी आपने परचेजेस पे जीएसटी पे किया है उसका इनपुट आपको रेजिडेंशियल रियल एस्टेट प्रोजेक्ट पे, चाहे वो अफोर्डेबल हो, नॉन अफोर्डेबल हो या कमर्शियल हो, उसके ऊपर आपको आईटीसी नहीं मिलेगा, उसके ऊपर आईटीसी आपको नहीं मिलता. In other words, whatever GST that you paid on the purchases related to residential real estate project, it may be affordable, non-affordable or commercial, in that case you will not get input tax credit. So that will form part of your cost. Yes. Coming to other than REP. Other than REP means more than 15% of your total property in terms of size is commercial. In that case, what is the GST rate? Again, if it is a affordable, this one, GST rate is 1%, you cannot claim ITC. If it is non-affordable residential project, then it is again 5% without ITC. It is the properties other than RREP, but commercial component, then you have to pay GST at the rate 12%. You have to pay GST at the rate 12%, and in this situation, you can also claim input tax credit. Only under this situation, you can claim input tax credit. So this is about the sales side. So if you are a builder or a developer, what matters? First you need to check what is your project. Your project is residential real estate project or other than residential real estate project. So if it is residential up to 15%, then you can have residential as well as commercial properties. If your commercial area is more than 15%, again it is classified as other than RREP. Again, in that also you can have residential as well as commercial project. What is the GST rate? If it is residential and affordable, then 1% in both the cases. If it is residential and non-affordable, then the GST rate is 5%. Again, you cannot claim ITC. Coming to the commercial property under the RREP, wherein less than 15% is commercial, tax rate is 5%. You cannot claim ITC. But if it is more than 15%, your project itself is a commercial project. In that case, your GST rate effectively is 12% and you can claim input tax credit. So this is the summary. Coming to the purchases side. So whatever cost that you incur in order to build that property, sell that property, what happens to that? Coming to the main cost for an apartment or for a commercial property, for building a property is land. How generally land is procured? So there are three ways. One is outright purchase. I go and purchase a land by myself. I go to a landlord and I purchase the property upfront. In that case, GST is exempt. Why? Because sale of land is out of scope of GST. GST का बातें यहाँ पे नहीं होता. Coming to I take land on lease, that is long term lease. What is the tenure? The tenure should be at least 30 years. If I am taking land on lease more than 30 years, generally we take it for 99 years. In that case, what happens? In that case, the developer or the promoter who is taking this property on lease have to pay GST under RCM. Not the seller. It is not the seller. Seller may be unregistered or registered. The landlord may be unregistered or registered. But if he is giving property on lease for a period of more than 30 years to a developer, to a builder, in that case, irrespective of whether it is a residential property, commercial property, GST is always payable at 18%. Correct? Now, in such kind of situations, how deals are generally structured in India is, there are two ways. For the lease amount which I have to pay, I will pay something upfront. At the time of taking the property, I'll pay something, and on monthly basis or for an annual basis, I'll pay lease rentals. Correct? So these are the two ways in which I will pay the lease amount. Something I'll give, some big amount I'll give upfront, and on an annual basis or on a monthly basis based on the arrangement that I have with the landowner, I'll pay him some money. Correct? whatever upfront payment I pay for the purpose of residential dwelling, only for the purpose of residential units, residential apartments. Please be careful. This discussion is already over. Whether the property is RREP, other than RREP, it is over. But in RREP also I can have residential, I can have commercial. Other than RREP also I can have residential, commercial. Now whatever discussion we are doing only for this residential component. I am not doing a distinction between these two. Yes. Now if you come down, whenever I am taking property on lease for more than 30 years and it is for related to the residential property, then there are two cases. Either I'll pay the entire sale consideration upfront, or generally what happens, something I'll pay upfront and some I'll have it as lease rental. So whatever amount I'm paying as upfront fees for the purpose of attributable to the residential apartment, in that case it is exempt. You need not pay any GST. You need not pay any GST for the portion that is related to the residential component. So what happens to this lease rental? That is the annual payment or the monthly payment that I will make to the landlord. On that you have to pay GST under RCM. On that you have to pay GST under RCM, and you cannot claim ITC on that. You cannot claim ITC on that. Why? Understand the intention. When it is residential property, government is only taxing you 1% if it is affordable. If it is residential apartment, it is only charging you 5%. Yes, it is already charging you lower GST rate, right, on your sale. So on your purchase, it will not give you input tax credit. Coming to commercial property, sir, what happens to the commercial property, commercial component? Then you have to pay GST under RCM. You have to pay GST under RCM, and you can claim input tax credit also. As you can see, whenever it is commercial property, you can claim always input, provided it is RRP, other than RREP. If it is a commercial property other than residential real estate project, that is commercial project, in the commercial project, if you have a commercial property, you can take ITC. So whatever RCM I pay, reverse charge mechanism means, as a developer, as a promoter, whenever I take property on lease, and whatever GST I had to pay, that input tax credit I can claim only to the extent it relates to commercial property. Coming to the other way in which property deals generally happen is called developmental rights, or generally we called it as a joint development agreement, wherein I am not transferring my land to a promoter. I will have an agreement with the promoter. I as a landlord will have an agreement with the promoter saying that you come and build on my property. I will not charge you anything right now. Once the property is built, I am giving you the rights to come and build a property on my land. Once the property is built, you can give me some money, or you can alternatively give me some flats in it. Correct? This is the third way in which as a promoter you can acquire land in India. Now what happens? Even in this case, whenever I take land under joint development agreement or on the development rights, it is again always taxable under RCM. Always taxable under RCM, in the sense, as a promoter I need to pay GST on that. Again, we'll divide the discussion into whether it is residential or for a commercial apartment. If it is for a residential apartment, then you need not pay this GST. It is exempt. Why? Understand the simple logic. Government wants people to have their own houses. सबका खुद का घर बनाने के लिए जो भी गवर्नमेंट को सपोर्ट देना है, गवर्नमेंट दे रहा है. अगर मैं यहाँ पे रेसिडेंशियल प्रॉपर्टी पे जीएसटी ले लेता प्रमोटर से, प्रमोटर को तो इनपुट नहीं मिलेगा. उसको अगर इनपुट नहीं मिलता तो उसको एक कॉस्ट बढ़ जाएगा. कॉस्ट बढ़ जाएगा तो अफोर्डेबल हाउसिंग नहीं हो पाएगा, सब लोग घर नहीं खरीद पाएंगे. तो whenever it is related to residential property, whenever it is related to residential property, वहां पे exempt है. यहाँ पे भी exempt है, लीज के केस में भी exempt था. Correct? But if it's related to commercial property, in that case you have to pay GST under RCM, and you can claim ITC also. You can claim input tax credit also. Again, as discussed, for the developmental rights, I can either pay my landlord in cash or I can give him some flats. In that case, when I'm giving money, I have to pay GST with the moment I give him money. Correct? But if I'm giving him flats, when should I pay GST under RCM is that whenever you get the completion certificate or first occupation. Till this time, you can pay your GST. So this is about the timeline. Coming to what happens if why, understand the logic behind why government is giving you exemption here also and here also. Yes. For the upfront payment, you are able to see that it is exempt. Why? Government is saying that whenever you go and sell this property, this apartment, you'll pay GST to the government. Now, if it is affordable, you'll pay 1%. If it is non-affordable, you'll pay at least pay 5% for the residential component. I'm telling you in both the cases. So government is giving you that benefit of not charging GST on the residential component with the assumption that whenever you sell those, you'll pay some GST to the government, correct? But what if you don't sell those properties? In that case, government has put a condition that till the time you get completion certificate, if you don't sell your apartments by the time you get the completion certificate, in that case, whatever exemption that the government had given you previously, whatever exemption, whatever benefit the government had given you previously, that will be reversed. In other words, say for example, I had 100 flats and I sold 80 flats at the time of CC and 20 flats I did not sell. If I don't sell 20 flats, then GST becomes payable. I did not pay any GST on the sale. In that case, government will say, boss, now you have to pay me tax. How much? The 18% which you are otherwise liable to pay under RCM, or assuming that you had sold these 20 flats, then you would have given me at least 1% in case of affordable, 5% in case of non-affordable, or 18%, whichever is lower. So you need to give me so much amount. So when it is to be paid, not at the time of acquisition, at the date of CC. In other words, गवर्नमेंट ने आपको बेनिफिट दिया कि घर बना के भेजो, आप भेज नहीं पाए, सीसी मिल गया, उसके बावजूद भी आप घर भेज नहीं पाए. इन दैट केस आपको क्या करना पड़ेगा? जो भी गवर्नमेंट ने आपको जीएसटी का बेनिफिट दिया था एग्जेम्पशन में, उसका प्रोपोर्शनेट आपको रिवर्स करना पड़ेगा. आपने 100 यूनिट्स बनाए थे, 80 यूनिट्स बिक गए, 20 यूनिट्स नहीं बिके. जो 20 यूनिट्स जो नहीं बिके, उसके ऊपर जो भी जीएसटी बनता है, अगर वो सेल होता तो 1% या 5% जीएसटी रेट से आप पे करते, या जब आप एक्वायर कर रहे थे प्रॉपर्टी इधर अंडर लीज और अंडर जॉइंट डेवलपमेंट एग्रीमेंट 18%, जिसमें से whichever is lower that amount of GST you need to pay to the government. At which time? At this time, CC or first occupation, not at the time of acquisition of land. Yes. Coming to time of supply, when you have to pay GST, when it is a regular sale. अगर आप बिल्डर होके बना के बेच रहे हो, तो जब भी आप इनवॉइस रेज करते हो या पेमेंट रिसीव करते हो, whichever is earlier, at that point of time you need to pay GST. When you are doing something to the landowners in case of joint development agreement, so at the time of CC you need to pay GST, not at the time of acquisition. For non-monetary transfers, again at the time of CC you need to pay GST to the government. This is all about sales. And on the purchases side, purchase of land. Sir, apart from land also you'll purchase something, no? Yes. What is the treatment for that? Government says to the maximum extent, at least 80% or more, you should have what? You should purchase through GST registered persons. You need not procure materials or any capital goods that you required from unregistered persons. But if you don't follow this rule, you make purchases from unregistered dealers. In that case, whatever you purchase in excess of 20%, see 20%, the government is straight away telling you 20% you can purchase from unregistered person who does not have GST. But if you are purchasing more than that, whatever you purchase in excess of 20%, on that you have to pay GST under RCM. On that you have to pay GST under RCM. I repeat, government says आपको minimum 80% तक आप रजिस्टर्ड पर्सन से खरीदी कीजिए जो भी आपको मटेरियल रिक्वायर्ड रहेगा. अगर आप 20% से ज्यादा अनरजिस्टर्ड पर्सन से खरीद रहे हो, तो 20% से ज्यादा जो भी अमाउंट रहेगा वो अमाउंट पे आपको जीएसटी पे करना है अपने पॉकेट से 18% आरसीएम. प्रमोटर को बोल रहा हूं मैं, क्योंकि प्रमोटर खरीद कर रहा है, करेक्ट. एंड सीमेंट के केस में तो गवर्नमेंट ने अपफ्रंट बोल दिया कि आपको 28% ही पे करना पड़ेगा. 18% का बेनिफिट सीमेंट के ऊपर नहीं मिलेगा. अगर आप सीमेंट अनरजिस्टर्ड पर्सन से खरीदते हो तो जीएसटी रेट आपको पे करना पड़ेगा 28%. Yes, for other than this one, it is 18%. कैपिटल गुड्स अगर आप खरीदते हो, कुछ प्लांट एंड मशीनरी वगैरह खरीदते हो, तो उसके ऊपर जो भी प्लांट एंड मशीनरी के ऊपर जो रेट रहेगा वही रेट आपको मिल जाएगा, करेक्ट. सो अंडरस्टूड. द प्रोक्योरमेंट ऑफ लैंड वाज अ डिफरेंट स्टोरी, अदर देन लैंड इज अ डिफरेंट स्टोरी. सर ये खरीदी पे मेरे को इनपुट मिलेगा क्या नहीं, आईटीसी मिलेगा क्या नहीं, आप ये चार्ट रेफर कर दो ना. यहाँ पे देख लो, अगर आप 1%, 5% में आ रहे हो तो आपको जीएसटी नहीं मिलेगा इनपुट. अगर आप अदर देन आरआरईपी कर रहे हो, कमर्शियल प्रॉपर्टी कर रहे हो, तो आपको इनपुट मिल जाएगा. दोनों का भी, लैंड का भी मिल जाएगा, अदर देन लैंड का भी मिल जाएगा. सो इन दिस, टू समराइज, व्हाट इज द क्रक्स? The crux is that first you need to understand what is your kind of project, whether it is a residential real estate project or it is a other than residential real estate project. In both the cases, you will have residential apartment, commercial apartment, or residential apartment or a commercial apartment. And in residential, again, there is two classifications. One is affordable, non-affordable. Affordable means it is up to 45 lakhs and it is up to 60 or 80 square meters, whether it is a metro area or a non-metro area. In that case, GST rate effectively is 1% and not 5%. Otherwise, what is the GST rate? For residential apartment, it is 5% without ITC. For affordable, it is 1% without ITC. Under residential real estate project, if you have commercial, it is again 5% but no ITC. If you are into purely other than RREP, it means if it is a commercial project and you are selling a commercial property, in that case it is 12%, but you can claim input tax credit. So this is the summary. Understood? So if you have any doubts, you can just give me in the comment section. I'll try to reply it at the earliest. Share it with someone who is into real estate, who is a developer or a builder, so that they can also be updated with this provisions. Thank you, everybody.